lovely individual. Thank you so much for the recommendation. I saw in a previous video that you guys sent me so many recommendations. Don't worry, I will get to it. This just happens to be the first one, so thank you so much for the recommendations. I guess if you guys still have more, leave them in the comments below. I'll keep screenshotting them and I'll keep adding it to my list, okay? I just want to say I do have gum in my mouth today. I'm gonna try not to jump on it or anything, but I just want to give an FYI. Let's get started. Today's story begins not with a scream, but with a silence that stretched for weeks. The silence of a family that vanished in Celebration, Florida. Their absence would only come to light by a frantic 911 call. This is the Todt family case, a story of quiet desperation and the terrifying ability of a man to live with what he had done. But what nobody knew was that Anthony Todt was facing serious financial and legal troubles, and things were unraveling fast. Before Anthony Todt made national headlines for one of the most disturbing family murders in recent history, there was already a dark legacy in his bloodline. Back in July of 1980, Anthony's father, Robert Todt, was arrested for a shocking crime of his own. He'd been accused of hiring one of his former students to kill his wife, Loretta. Robert was a board-certified special education teacher employed as a high school teacher by the Bensalem Township School District. Robert had lived in Leviton, Pennsylvania with his wife Loretta and their 2 children. The motive? So that he could be with his mistress. Robert had been engaged while still being married with the mistress, mind you, and was making plans towards marriage, which was to take place on April 19th, 1980. In the evening of March 19th, 1980, while Robert Todt was out of the house, he was actually staying at his mistress's house. Now, I want to say the mistress said that she believed Robert had been divorced. That's what he told her, and that's what she thought. You know, she was engaged, she was about to get married. She had no idea that he was still married to Loretta. Now, Robert reportedly gave clear instructions. His wife was to be the only target. No one else was to be harmed. Anthony was just 4 years old at the time, and he was there. He actually heard the moment his mother was shot. Miraculously, Loretta survived the gunshot to the head, but the bullet did destroy her left eye and remains still lodged in her skull. The former student testified in March of 1980 that Robert offered him $800 to kill a woman he described as a babysitter. Robert gave him a .32 caliber pistol and bullets. 3 days before the shooting, Robert went to the student's home, woke him up, and brought him to the Todt house. Robert and the student then drove to Loretta's work at Frankfurt Hospital, where he was told the plan. The plan was for the student to surprise Loretta as she entered her car after work, take her to a back road, and shoot her. But the student was too scared to carry out this plan, so Robert gave him a new plan. Robert gave the student a key to his house, where he would enter the home through the garage, shoot Loretta, and would ruffle up some drawers to make it look like a burglary had taken place. Robert was convicted of attempted homicide, criminal conspiracy, and criminal solicitation. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The former student received a lighter sentence of 4 years due to the deal he struck with prosecutors. Loretta had recovered and eventually remarried, but the very time, Anthony Todt was already under federal surveillance. Investigators with the Department of Health and Human Services were tracking him for suspected healthcare fraud, specifically billing Medicare and Medicaid for services that were never rendered at his physical therapy clinic in Connecticut. It turned out Anthony was using the stolen money to keep up appearances. He was already being sued by loan companies in New York for unpaid debts. By the time everything caught up to him, he owed more than $100,000. Originally, the plan was to gather more intel quickly, snap some photos, keep watch, and build the case. But by January 2020, a federal arrest warrant had been issued. It was time to move in. Agents arrived at the Todt home. They knocked. No answer. But the front door was unlocked, so they let themselves in. Inside the house was eerily quiet. As they made their way through, they found Anthony standing at the top of the stairs. He looked disheveled, disoriented, and unsteady. They asked if their kids were home. Anthony replied vaguely, saying he couldn't remember if they had gone to a sleepover. When asked where Megan was, he said she was upstairs asleep. He had tried calling for her, but she didn't respond. That's when the agents headed upstairs to check for themselves. They entered into the master bedroom, and what they found was something no one was prepared for. At first, one of the agents didn't see Megan as her body was hidden by blankets, but then she spotted the children. Two of the boys, she said, had turned completely black, as black will say, in the first initial interview, he was kind of almost slurring his words a little bit, and you could tell he was under the influence. It was the first sign of what would become a pattern: shifting stories, emotional contradictions, and a slow unraveling of the truth. But none of his versions matched the evidence, and none could explain how he lived in the home with their bodies for days, possibly weeks. As investigators pressed for answers, Anthony Todt revealed more disturbing layers of what he claimed had led to the deaths of his entire family. He told detectives that Megan, his wife, had become increasingly withdrawn and spiritually fixated. She had started watching videos online about the afterlife, energy realms, and the end of the world. As she spiraled deeper into this content, Anthony said they had both become convinced that an apocalyptic event was approaching. To them, death wasn't the end, it was a passage, a release. Anthony claimed that because Megan had been chronically ill, the idea of dying and achieving some form of eternal peace or salvation began to appeal to her. He said they believed that if they all died together, they would avoid suffering, stay united, and reunite in the afterlife. He even told police that they had spoken with their children, Alec, Tyler, and Zoe, about what would happen if either parent died. They kind of were like, how would you feel if mommy died? How would you feel if daddy died? He claimed the children had responded by saying they wouldn't want to be left behind and that they'd want to die too. Then one evening, while watching TV, a commercial for cough medicine came on. That's when Anthony said an idea formed. What if they just gave the kids medicine, enough to make them fall asleep, maybe even enough to never wake up? They tried. They gave the children high doses of Benadryl, hoping it would quietly sedate them into death. But it didn't work. So according to Anthony, they turned to a more violent plan, one that would guarantee death. Exsanguination. I hope I'm saying that right. That's the word he used. Exsanguination. I'll put it here just in case I'm saying it wrong, but it's a medical term for death caused by extensive blood loss. They believed it would be fast, final, and necessary. But what followed was not peaceful. It was not serene. It was brutal, chaotic, and irreversible. He started with Zoe, where he had suffocated her. Then it was Alec, where he stabbed him and then suffocated him. Then he stabbed Tyler. Anthony then went to the dog Breezy, where he suffocated the dog. He then said that Megan wanted to go next, so he gave her a knife and laid next to her in bed. She allegedly stabbed herself in the stomach, but after 45 minutes of waiting and feeling nothing, she decided to stab herself again in the liver. Christmas. Initially, Anthony appeared cooperative with law enforcement. However, during a later phone call with his sister from jail, his story changed dramatically. He claimed to have little to no memory of the events around Christmas or the first week of his detention. According to him, he did not even recall arriving at the jail or where he was, only remembering that he had been at the hospital. He suggested that he had been out of it the entire time due to a head injury and therefore had no clear recollection of his earlier confession. Anthony told his sister that he was not at home the night his family was murdered. Instead, he said he was at their nearby condo. He mentioned that Zoe wanted her silver Mickey necklace for reasons he said she would understand later. He also admitted to falling asleep longer than intended, also citing reasons his sister would later discover why. He said he didn't remember what he told the investigators because he was completely stoned. Despite everything, he expressed disbelief that Megan could have committed the crime and said he missed her and the children deeply. His revised narrative painted Megan as having lost her mental stability, with Anthony portraying himself as someone trying to support her during that difficult time. He insisted that even after her death, he wanted to protect Megan's dignity and reputation. In April 2022, the trial began. Anthony Todt's defense called only one witness, himself. Tearfully, he described coming home to find his children dead, calling it the most horrific day of his life. He added that witnessing his wife's death in front of him made it even more unbearable. He told the jury he was blindsided that he never saw coming. But during cross-examination, the prosecution confronted him with a stark contradiction. The prosecutor asked, "You told detectives that you went into Zoe's room, gathered the courage, and rolled over on top of your daughter until she suffocated. Isn't that what you told law enforcement?" Anthony responded defensively, "Is this a yes or no question?" The prosecutor insisted yes or no. Then he admitted that is what the video, yes, showed. Throughout the trial, he repeatedly distanced himself from his confession by claiming the video portrayed some sickly version of himself, altered by Benadryl and mental health struggles, implying he was not in a clear state of mind when he confessed. Despite this, the jury found Anthony guilty on all counts. His defense was ultimately undermined by evidence that he remained with the bodies and by the fact that he had the means, motive, and opportunity. Financial desperation and irrational behavior culminated in this horrific crime, which he then attempted to cover up. Even after the verdict, Anthony continued to insist he was innocent and wasn't there that night, an assertion that only added insult to injury. Whether he truly believes his own lies or is simply delusional, it is clear to all that justice was served. Anthony was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. What do you think of this case?